What's up, Coach TJ?
Hello.
You're already eating Halloween candy.
Oh, you know what? You got us Halloween candy
And
about
it's all
2 months
gone. It's all
ago.
gone. I love Halloween candy because it's like a perfect little fun, like you can microdose candy throughout the day.
What is your favorite candy?
Oh, man, that's hard. I'm actually surprised you found it. Judging by the wrappers on my desk, it seems like you found a Twix.
Yes.
I thought I've been systematically eating those first.
Those are good.
They're really good because they have a little cookie in them.
I feel like these minis,
The
I don't
mini
know.
Twix is amazing.
We're going to talk about what the best gel is
Yeah.
on this podcast, but I'm thinking about what's
The best Halloween candy is
Halloween
mini
candy.
Twix, for
How
sure.
many grams of carbs are in one of these?
I don't know. Does it say?
No, but it's got probably too much milk in it for me. It could disrupt
No,
my GI system.
The mini Twix is a perfect snack. It is literally the perfect Halloween candy.
I did have a mini
and then
Snickers.
I do love the mini Snickers. I also love the mini Milky Way. The mini Three Musketeers doesn't super duper do it for me, which is weird because I love a full size Three Musketeers. I love nougat, but when
Nougat.
it's small, I just don't know. Like maybe size
Nugget?
matters for nougat. Nougat.
Nougat?
Nougat.
Nugget?
The thing that's on the inside of Three Musketeers. It's nougat, right?
Oh, wow. I have
Is that
no
not-
idea. I don't know if that's a thing or not.
It is. The inside of a Three Musketeers is nougat.
Well, happy Halloween.
Yeah.
That's a good surprise that there's some nougat in there.
There's
I like
nougat
that.
in Three Musketeers. Don't at me. But we have a really awesome podcast this week. We just got back from vacation, and boy, oh boy, did we learn a lot.
Oh, my God.
Many things were
We
learned.
went to the depths of ourselves
We
out
did.
there.
I feel like I'm not going to be making an ad for tourism in rural Portugal anytime soon.
No.
But then we're going to get into some hot or nots, and these are going to be super juicy this week. We're going to be talking about different styles of periodization and what our favorite gels are.
Ooh.
Then we're going to dive into the most useful data on TrainingPeaks and sort of break down the metrics that we as coaches look at, and then what we look at like when we're assessing our own training as athletes, and what stuff is helpful for athletes to look at, and what things we definitely don't want to overemphasize when it comes to using data to guide our training.
Yeah, deep dive here on that.
Deep dive. I think it's really, you and I love looking at the science. We love looking at the data, but it's always important to put all of these things into context and assess the limitations of any given piece of information.
I know. And the more I use TrainingPeaks in my coaching, the more I see the limitations of apps like this, but also see the
nuances.
Yeah, I mean, it's the limitations of anything really that's out there trying to interpret the signs and signals that come from athletes. But I do really like this app.
Yeah.
I think using it has really helped to transform the level of my coaching.
For sure. Same here.
And with that, nothing is perfect.
Nothing is perfect.
And I will not be here to pick apart some of the things that I don't like about TrainingPeaks. But
I
think that
I wouldn't say there's things I don't like, but again, I think there are pieces of data that we always have to take into context, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
so.
I'm psyched.
Yeah, me too. So kicking things off, we just got back from rural Portugal. It's literally the most random place on earth. So TJ's mom is applying for Portuguese citizenship and has been studying for her test. So we went over to go hang out with her. So this was I think one of the first vacations that we've ever taken that wasn't about running. The intent wasn't to run. I gotta say, I'm not convinced by this whole vacationing to not run thing.
Well, we did go to Hawaii last year.
That's true.
And we practiced the idea of taking time to just take time.
True. Yes.
And I guess I'll put my spin on this, which is there's a book called 4,000 Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember the author. Do you
Oliver
remember?
Berkman.
Yeah, great author.
He has a new book out about quitting that I just ordered, and I'm really stoked to read.
Oh, man.
Shout out to athlete Sarah Hancock for the recommendation.
Love it. Love it. That'll be on my audiobook list. But I really like that book. And there's a part in the beginning of that book where they talk about people used to have a lot more leisure time.
Yeah.
And the purpose of that time was to take a step back and like reflect and maybe dive into the more existential parts of life, like the more philosophical parts of living.
Back in the day, farmers would take a break from the farm to go sit and ponder the big questions of life.
When things are growing in the ground, I guess they take a lot of time. And so there was more time to do those things. And I think as, industrialization happened, people started to earn more money and be able to take vacations. And they did that solely for the purpose of having leisure time.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to address some of those bigger questions. And, that's always my lens on why it's like, okay, why aren't we prioritizing training as much? Why are we prioritizing a vacation? And it's like, well, because you have to have that space. But on the other side of that, I think one of the things that we see in society is like people, they work more so they can work more, so they can work more, so they can have more stuff. And taking that step back is a good process for me because I don't want to live like that.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to have sometimes that, at least, as I get older, that space to like really reflect. And, well, I don't know if I got enough of that reflection time on this trip because of all the logistics around trying to get our runs done. So it almost backfired.
Yeah. It was weird because I feel like we didn't do much, but we also didn't not do anything.
Right.
So I don't know. Like for me, it was really awesome to go to a new place and get to hang out with your family who I love. I really love running. I think it's always like, just because of my history, it's always helpful to have a check on like, can I take unplanned rest days? And what I learned is like, I can, and it's totally fine. And I actually didn't feel that anxious.
Yeah.
But I also learned that like running genuinely makes me so happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of my preferred activities on vacation. Like if you tell me I can go do anything in a day, like my heart just wants to run. That's what I want to do. That is the most fun thing to me.
And that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing. I guess you can put that out in the universe and people will think what they think about that. But hopefully the listeners maybe can relate a little bit to that, like, running just for the sake of running, which is something that you've often advocated for here.
Yeah, it's like my playtime. And again, like I do have like other things that I like to do. Obviously, I'm always trying to flesh out other identities. But again, like working so hard to take time off, it was just like, man, like I'm not really doing the number one thing that I would prefer to do with like accrued time off.
I think that's the hard thing about family vacations, which I haven't done a family vacation since 2013.
Yeah, and just to be candid, we had to have some pretty tough conversations with family around protecting our training time, and it was really tough. So I always have empathy for athletes who struggle to talk about that with their family, their partners, and their loved ones. And it did like take sort of us stepping up and saying like, this is like, we don't necessarily, when we do kind of have to do this, like you are training for a 50-mile race. We want to do this. And it took, I think, a lot of bravery and courage for us to be able to advocate for ourselves in that way. But it was also like, it was tough, and it required
with 10 other people.
With 10 other people. So it required us getting vulnerable and having to compromise. We took 1 0 day that maybe I would have preferred not been a 0 day. We did a 3-hour long run in a torrential downpour, like the entire time, start to finish. There was maybe a few moments of the run where it wasn't like raining. Like the default rain for this was like standing in a shower, like it was really hard for you to navigate using your phone because it was so wet and you like literally couldn't use the map on your phone. So that was pretty character building, and we did get to see a lot of cool things via running that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. But I think I'm good on seeing tiny churches in rural Portugal for a hot sec.
Saw a lot of churches. It was very historical. If we weren't driving,
a lot of vineyards.
If we weren't driving to see a church somewhere with our family, we were running by a church.
Yeah, a lot of church.
I think it's a really interesting thing, the concept of running on vacation, right? Like, what is your leisure time? How do we use that? Like, for both of us, we enjoy using a part of that time to run.
Yeah.
And I think when we were showing, our like family, like pictures of the places that we were going by foot, even though it was raining, even though the weather sucked, like they're like, oh my God, you got to like see that by running?
Then they started to sort of understand, like, I promise, like, this is fun for us.
Yeah, like we enjoy being out here in sideways rain in the dark and unsure where we're going.
Yeah. It did take a lot of planning ahead, advocating to protect our time, setting boundaries. We learned a lot about not trusting Strava heat maps and navigating in rural Portugal.
What are some of the do's and don'ts takeaways for athletes who are kind of, I don't know, maybe they're taking a runcation?
So like they're going on vacation with the intent to run?
Yeah.
Eat a lot, sleep a lot.
Eat a lot, sleep a lot.
Yep.
What about if they're like unfamiliar with the zone?
Do research.
Okay. So I did a lot of research on where we were going, and the municipality or whatever, the area we were in had these designated routes.
I also want to say that, so the first time we went on a run, we were like, what the fuck? Like, this terrain is crazums. Like, it's mostly cobblestone. Also, again, it's pouring rain this entire time. And it is like, scientifically, it is much harder to run in humidity than at altitude. And I know I was really frustrated coming down to sea level and then being like, great, like my mile times are literally like a minute and a half slower than they would be if I was running at altitude on trail. What the fuck? Cobblestone is truly the worst surface of all time.
It's a tough surface.
It's a super tough surface.
Oh my God.
And then these routes we were taking would just send us through random vineyards, up random mountains, and
through
we
people's
didn't
backyards.
see through people's backyards. We had to climb over a gate. Like, this was truly like, I've just never seen anything. Actually, it sort of reminded me of that UTMB race we did a while ago where there just like wasn't trail.
Oh, in Argentina?
That one and the Mexico one.
Yeah.
We actually were joking, like, UTMB is definitely going to put a race here because there's no trail. So that's how you know they're coming soon. It was super frustrating and really, like, humbling, which is always sometimes, like, a good check. Like, we both had to bail on our workouts because there just simply wasn't terrain where you could run for more than a mile. I mean, there wasn't, like, I think there's nowhere where you could run for even a quarter mile without having to navigate. Like, there were so many turns.
So brutal.
It was so slow.
So brutal.
And we didn't see a single other person on one of the routes that we took the entire time we were there. And we counted the entire 10 days that we were in Portugal and saw 4 runners total, none female runners. So running culture,
runners.
Not alive and well in
spreading the ripple.
Yeah. Viana do Castelo. So
well, I think
we will not be relocating Microcosm World Headquarters to Portugal.
Probably not. I think there's a few, I don't know, at least in my book, there's a few do's and don'ts here. Don't trust the heat maps.
Yeah.
When you're going to an unfamiliar
place.
Okay,
these work in the U.S. Like, I swear by these in the U.S.
Don't work over there.
Don't work as much in Europe.
These paths were like, so fucked. Overgrown. The amount of prickers
we
that
were
I got.
Clearly the only people that had run on these, like, recommended routes in a year.
Run, hiked, anything?
Accidentally stumbled into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
GPX files are helpful.
Yes.
But sometimes it's just like, okay, just go the way that is obvious.
Yeah.
Like, don't, how many times we like wasted time being like, I'm sure
well,
this trail will get better.
And it never did. And there were, actually, it was so weird. Like, the routes were really wild. But I think it really helped us adapt a mentality of flexibility and just adjusting things and like holding the training loosely, which for us still meant running like a 90-mile week. Oh my God. I think Bowie just threw up under the desk. No, we're good. Okay. False alarm. It was just a hiccup.
Weird. That was a weird hiccup.
I didn't like that sound at all.
Red flag hiccup.
I think it helped us like hold the training lightly.
Yeah.
But it also did show me like there is almost always a way for you to get something somewhat productive done.
Yeah. And just to be fair, because we had a conversation about this the other day where you're like, I'm not feeling good coming off the trip. I'm like, okay, that's reasonable. I feel like I lost fitness.
Well, because we couldn't do any speed work.
True.
And it was all super fucking slow.
It was really slow.
Yeah.
But we did run about 90 miles in 16 hours of training over the 9 or 10 days that we trained. And this is a significant amount of time. But for that amount, I mean, like we really fought for a lot of those miles, which made the vacation feel a little less leisurely as I would have maybe preferred.
My idea of vacation does include running, but it does not usually include running for 3 hours in the mud in a consistent downpour.
Okay, vacation highlights, top 3 moments.
They would all be pastries. I love pastries.
Pastries.
I fuck with pastries.
1, 2, and 3.
All pastries.
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. Well,
you had a lot of cappuccinos.
Did have a lot of cappuccinos, but it's hard to find oat milk there. Also we went to a vineyard and we learned how they make wine and port, and I really enjoyed learning about grape production. So that was a highlight. What about you?
You like to stamp the grapes with your feet?
I really wanted to stamp the grapes with my feet because I think that would be excellent cross training.
Next trip. Okay, top moments. 1, the 3-hour epic run that we had that we started at like 4 o'clock
at night,
and we're almost got what is it called? Benighted on, where we were definitely worried that we weren't going to make it home.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And then no one would find our skeletons for like 4 years because no one goes up there.
Props for no big freakouts on that because it was definitely getting tense. Good relationship tester.
Yeah. No fights were had during runs. Actually, I don't know if that's true. There might have been
I don't think there was.
No big fights.
For doing 16 hours of training together, which is not normal for us.
Yeah. It's a lot of time together. Yeah.
We were fine. No surprise to the listeners who are rooting for us.
That's true.
Okay. Number 2, the 0 day, where we went to Porto and we did a full tourist day.
Yeah, we did.
That was cool.
Yeah.
And it rained, but we made the most of it.
We
did. Number 3, I think it was just like the travel in the planes for me that I enjoyed.
Plane travel?
That was kind of like the only time where I got to like
is
be
this like a
by myself.
Kink? Like what is like why?
Well, every other moment on the trip, it was like, I got to be with my mom or my sister, or we're trying to drive somewhere to find a place that's suitable to run, or I'm driving everyone
and you're
to
like,
some town to see a castle.
I can't wait to eat stale pretzels at 14,000 feet sandwiched between 2 strangers.
I think it was just like a nice time for me to like sit with
catch up
my
on
thoughts.
Kevin Costner's cinematic universe.
I did watch, what's that one called?
Horizon.
Okay, that was not my favorite movie of the trip.
What was your favorite movie of the trip?
My favorite movie was the documentary on Lil Stevie Van Zandt. He is the guitar player from Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, who is also Silvio from the beloved Sopranos show. The right-hand man to Tony Soprano has this documentary. And I was like, who is this pirate man that looks like this guy from Sopranos?
He looks like an aging gypsy woman.
I have got to see this. And it was an incredible documentary about this guy. He's so multifaceted. And that was really cool to see, like, wow, we all have so many different parts and things we can express about ourselves. That was very interesting.
All right. Not here to yuck your yum.
All right. What was your favorite plane movie of the trip?
I started I guess it wasn't a movie. I did watch Roman Holiday, which I hadn't seen in a while, which I love.
I don't know.
It's a old Audrey Hepburn movie. And then I binged the series on Amazon Prime called My Lady Jane, which is like a feminist retelling of Lady Jane Grey's ascent to being the Queen of England for 6 days before being beheaded.
Wow.
But it has like modern music and they swear a lot. It was so me. I was like, I feel like they made this specifically for me.
That is you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you had that time and space.
I know. I was like, there's no way TJ would ever watch this. So I've got to get it all done now.
Nope. Not a chance. All right. Hot or not?
I'm really stoked. So
Runcations. This was not a runcation, to be fair. We probably would have gone somewhere that was more conducive to running.
We would have gone literally anywhere else on planet Earth. Like the Mariana Trench, probably more conducive to running than
vacations,
where we went.
So hot. I hope everyone gets a chance to take a vacation this year and or next year. But
and work with your coach to decide what level of training works with the resources you have available.
I was way over ambitious.
I told my coach I didn't need to modify training at all, and that was not correct.
I missed a lot of workouts.
Yeah, same. No intensity. None intensity was done. A lot of base building. So hot or not, this these are both going to be really chonky, and this is partially like grounded in the irony of like all of these hot or nots started as just supposed to be like hot take, like really quick hot takes, but because it's you and it's me, they all devolved into let's look at the research for 11 and a half minutes about any given topic. So I just wanted to lean into that side of things and just embrace having some chonky research heavy hot or nots. So hot or not, block versus mixed periodization.
Okay. Why don't we define these terms first?
Yeah. So there are some big differences between block periodization and mixed periodization, and that really lies primarily in their structure and their focus. So with block periodization, this is going to involve focusing on one specific running goal or like workout type, like endurance or speed, for a concentrated period, like 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes even longer. I've seen like longer, 8 to 12
definitely.
Before moving on to the next block. Each block is more intense and specific, which really, like theory says, allows for deeper adaptation to a particular aspect of fitness, whether it's threshold, VO2 max, whatever that is.
Yeah. Mixed periodization, I think also can kind of be called a hybrid approach to training. But the contrast here is you are working on multiple different combinations of training stimuli at once. So you might be doing endurance work and speed work and strength work within the same week and cycle. And then this really kind of like spreads the focus out across different like aspects of an athlete's fitness. I don't know about what I'm going to say for hot or not here, to be completely fair.
Well,
what do you think the pros are of the block?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is really beneficial about block training is that theory shows, and this is something we've seen in our own coaching, is that you can see greater adaptation to specific skills like VO2 max, like threshold work, and less chance of overtraining in any one area, like overemphasizing top end to the detriment of threshold work or never working on aerobic base.
Yeah.
Why would you potentially use, like, what are the benefits of mixed training from your perspective?
Well, I think it keeps all like fitness attributes active simultaneously. And I think this is, a lot of people will say, well, that helps to prevent detraining in specific areas. Now, I do believe that particular part of this is under scrutiny.
Right. And all of this is, so the reason that I personally use both approaches depending on the athlete. I guess, spoiler alert, I like both.
Right. They're both hot.
They're both hot.
And they're both not.
Right. In the research, like this is like if you want to have adult men just absolutely melt down on Reddit, ask people what type of periodization is most beneficial for elite male athletes. And it's not crazy clear. Yeah, it's not crazy clear in the research. There isn't a clear winner, right? So it's very based on the individual. It's very based on the background in training and the goals that the athlete wants to pursue.
Yeah.
I tend to use a hybrid or mixed approach for most of my athletes. And this functions on the premise that you can't, like, and this is, I think, pretty intuitive. We kind of always are targeting and developing more than one energy system at a time, right? Like even when we're doing base building, I'll throw in strides and hill strides to help, sort of work on that top end. Or like at the same time, even if you're doing a threshold block, you're still inherently doing aerobic base because at least 80% of your training needs to be below aerobic threshold. So all training is kind of hybrid training. Yeah. Even if it's not, like, even if the intention isn't specifically.
Right. Every workout can't be VO2 max.
Correct. Like you can't go out and just for 12 weeks run every single mile at VO2 max effort. So that's one reason that I tend to like that approach for most athletes. However, with more advanced athletes or athletes where we're seeing they have a particular energy system that looks underdeveloped or that we really need to strengthen, I will target that in a specific training block. Or if I have like a really advanced athlete going into an ultramarathon, I'll do like a longer threshold block leading up to that event. How do you think about which approach to use with your athletes?
Yeah, so I think it's important maybe to mention like why one approach could be helpful versus another one. So, periodization, that kind of systemic planning of workouts over time to optimize one specific adaptation, I think is is really, really, really helpful,
Right.
depending on what the athlete's goals are and what part of the process they're in. One of the reasons why I like this approach and use it a lot with my more advanced athletes and elites is because we can target that one adaptation,
Right.
and then we don't have these extra stresses that are just like lingering in the build that aren't actually like enough time at intensity
Yeah.
to create meaningful adaptation, but are enough to like undermine the athlete's training. So like little stresses that aren't necessarily useful and don't have a specific purpose can kind of just act as like death by 1,000 cuts to an
Sure.
athlete. And so when you have a periodized approach, it's basically like you're going to either have like a recovery day or
Yeah.
a hard day.
Yeah.
And so like you either are recovering or you're doing the training that provokes adaptation. And I really like that.
Yeah.
I really like that because it kind of gets right down to like what is the purpose and intention here?
Right.
It is to build endurance base. We're doing a run that is this long.
Yeah.
It is to have a better, more evolved and greater VO2 max to push your ceiling up. We are doing this specific workout.
Right.
And and the other workouts are not in the gray area.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, this like doesn't necessarily, it's like not necessarily enough to really help, but it's also not like so much that it's gonna like hurt. Maybe it does hurt the athlete because it's in that gray area. Gray area training, the consensus is like it's not actually that helpful.
Right. Something I like to think about is that no stimulus is neutral.
Right.
It's either productive or unproductive.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to
when you
look
think
at
about like, I'll have athletes be like, "Oh, I want to go do a body pump class." And I'm like, "Okay, that is that is stress on your body and it's not productive given our like desired outcome." So we're like, "I want to go on a 6-hour hike." And it's like, "Well, that's stress. It's not necessarily productive for your train." That doesn't mean you like can't live life, right? But it's always, I think, helpful when you're making decisions to understand that everything is stress and assessing it on a scale of like productive to unproductive and thinking about like the trade-offs that are inherent in that.
Absolutely. And I think, again, one of the reasons why you have a coach overseeing the creation of these blocks of training, so that way you have somebody who you're mirroring back like how you're responding to the workouts, and that can help to continue to adapt the training based on how you feel. Like one of the things when I'm programming in a block style format for my athletes is I almost only do 1 or 2 weeks of training at a time. Rather, when I have a more mixed approach or hybrid, it's a lot easier to build like 3 weeks out. It's not because the workouts aren't so stressful that you're like going to be overly worried about somebody being able to recover before the next one.
Right.
And so like, because the intensity in the block is so acute, and it's either hard or not hard, that also kind of can help to balance out things. And in my experience, leaves athletes at less risk for injury and overtraining. Like there's almost more oversight there, but I believe you have to be at a certain level to really realize the benefits of like a block style approach. Like there is like a foundation that comes from
like if
hybrid
you're not,
training that's created to get to that point.
So it's like, especially like if someone like has an underdeveloped aerobic base or has never done top end work, honestly, I'd prefer to do like literally a year of hybridized training with them. Like when I've been moving athletes over to a block approach, those are usually athletes that have been training with me for 3+ years.
Yeah.
Just because they need that deeper context of like, okay, we really do need to dramatically change the stimulus for this person. And there is like a specific intention behind the block, and can they realistically sustain VO2 max effort for more than 2 minutes, right? Which that is pretty advanced stuff.
Oh, totally.
And that doesn't mean you can't get very, very fit doing different things, right?
No, but
that's why we have the hybridized approach, is it is always improving a few different things at a time. Obviously, then as we get closer to races, that stimulus is going to be much more specific to the race that we're targeting.
And think about it like this. I think this is a good way for athletes to think about it. Is the best thing you can do if you're self-coaching
is hire a coach.
No, it's a yes. Yes and no. Yes and it's the least amount of training you can do to provoke adaptation.
Right.
So if you can effectively get faster by doing more strides than VO2 max work, do more strides.
Yeah.
Until those strides no longer become
the stimulus
you need. And so one of the things I love about it, especially for me as an athlete, when I'm in, doing block training with my coach, is like, I don't have like these runs where then I have to do strides too.
Yeah.
Because like I've already done 1 million strides. Why would I do more strides? Like I don't need more strides.
Yeah.
I need more intention into the things that like actually need improvement. And so like you start somewhere and over time, you take, I don't know, a progression, you set a progression.
Yeah.
And some things get left behind and don't always need to be maintained, because if you're doing enough speed anyways, you're going to be able to go back and do those strides just fine.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for them in any part of this, but I always use that as an example because in a hybrid approach, you see it a lot on plans on the internet and stuff. It's like, okay, and I've definitely prescribed this to a lot of my less advanced athletes, but it's like strides this day, workout this way, easy day this day, rest day, workout, or long run, then another day, easy day with strides. And it's like, well, that's a lot of strides. Strides are good. We know that they, help with various different things. But then we also have a workout, and that's a VO2 max workout or something, a 10K workout. And then the long run is 20 miles. Almost like we're doing a 20-mile run while we're also doing 10K work. That's like, okay, that's a lot of stress.
Right. You're sort of like and you're like, those stresses don't necessarily, like they can almost like pull apart from each other.
Which is why like
those are pretty radically different energy systems.
Yeah.
So when I do have a block approach with an athlete that I'm trying to improve their VO2 max, you're going to see the overall volume come down.
Totally. Well, you have to, because the intensity is so high, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're doing 10K work, it's pretty inappropriate to have a 20-mile run.
Right.
Or a 4-hour long run or something. That should probably be more like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So that like that stress isn't so huge that's all of a sudden the primary focus.
Yeah.
But that's the downside of the hybrid approach. But the hybrid approach done well, when you're balancing out the right stimuli throughout the week and you have the appropriate length of the long run and the right amount of strides, and the workout is the certain length, and it's the the minimum dose to provoke the adaptations, not the max.
Yeah.
Then you can see the benefits from it, and it's hugely beneficial. Which is why it's like, okay, hot or not,
right?
I don't know.
All of that is to say,
all of it is hot.
Both of them have a time and a place, but I do think that understanding, like having an athlete understand which approach we're taking, can help them better understand the intent behind each effort, whether it's VO2 max, whether it's the strides, whether it's threshold work, whether it's the long run.
Yeah.
And again, that is the approach I take with the majority of my athletes. And so I think that understanding that and knowing what it is and being able to understand the basic concepts of periodization and having that intentional structure that is meant to optimize performance by balancing recovery and stimulus, critical for every athlete. All of our athletes obviously are going through periodized training.
Yeah.
But many athletes who are new, like usually when we get them and I'm reviewing the training they've been doing before they hire me, I'm like, whoa, baby, we need to periodize this shit.
All
so
right. Let's get a focus going here.
Let's get a focus going.
Yeah.
Let's get some strategery in here.
I love a good strategery.
Love that strategery. So block training, hot. Mixed training, hot. So the next question is something that I've literally had 3 athletes ask me this week. And the question is, what is the best gel?
The one that works for you.
That's correct. There is no one best gel.
Woo,
I mean, this
glad
is
I got
one
that
reason,
off my chest.
like, yes, we are not sponsored. All of the companies that we partner with are brand agnostic for nutrition, because we do not want to promote any one specific brand or product. We do like to offer discounts through our team at places where multiple products are available to our athletes for testing and selection.
Microcosm Club
at the feed. I just ordered my personalized water bottle, and I'm pretty stoked for that. It says Coach Zoë on it.
That's awesome.
Isn't that cute?
I haven't ordered mine yet, but I feel like we've made it.
Yeah.
Now that we have those.
That we have like a super legit like water bottle.
Yeah. I like how my favorite part of being part of the feed is that there's absolutely no benefit to us as an organization to be part of the feed.
Hashtag not sponsored.
It is just 100% about getting
the
athlete access to the nutrition that is going to make a difference for them. And when we get into what is the best gel, I guess this is an advertisement for the feed unofficially.
No, it's an advertisement for trying shit out. Because I'm always a little actually like hesitant to share the specific things that I use with my athletes, because I don't believe that I believe they're the best thing for me, and that's why I use them for me. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be the best for any other athlete. I know a lot of athletes that do not like the things that I use. You and I use different things.
No, and it's so true. And I think that's the trouble with maybe the influencer space and social media right now. There's a few people out there who their voices are quite loud and people really listen, and then athletes go and they start using those products. And even if it's not the intention of those people, just by talking about it, people think, oh my God, so and so performed like this, they did that, that's what I need to do. And then they haven't had the experience, the training, the nutritional guidance to like actually make those things work for them. And it's an issue. And I think one of the things that's great about like the feed is the ability to like order and try things.
A bunch of different things and like sort of make an a la carte option.
And that's what people need to do.
Yeah. And whenever you see a pro athlete on the internet touting like, I did this thing and that's how I got this like amazing breakthrough performance, the way you should be interpreting that is I found the thing that works for me and I'm able to eat the amount of it that works for me.
Yeah.
Because that will be very different depending on each individual. So
100%.
I think that try a bunch of stuff. Just like go to your local run store, go to the feed, ball out, and try some stuff that sounds good to you. I also, hashtag not sponsored, love mashed potatoes. I would take a potato sponsorship.
They have those on the feed?
They don't, but you can get them literally anywhere else. And Pop-Tarts. You and I both love Pop-Tarts.
Pop-Tarts are good. Poppers.
You like the little poppers.
Those are fun.
They're super fun. So, just go out and try some stuff. And I think that when you're looking at gels, it's really important to look at the ingredients list and look for gels that prioritize glucose, maltodextrin, and fructose for fast energy. So I think this is going to be, this is kind of like an emergent area, but I do think it can be beneficial for athletes to look for a gel, and most inherently come this way, that has a glucose to fructose ratio of 2-to-1.
Yeah.
The idea is that glucose and fructose are absorbed through different pathways.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually maximize your carbohydrate absorption because they use different transporters in the body.
Couple, maybe examples of that. Morton
does that.
Second,
I think
Precision.
Yeah, like most gels
do.
Yeah.
Goo Liquid.
Yeah.
Roxane.
So most do, but some of the like weirder, more quote unquote natural ones do not.
Might not.
Spring. Yeah. On that note, we want to avoid slow release carbs unless you are in a long, low intensity event because they can cause gut issues. Again, whole foods like the mashed potatoes and the Pop-Tarts are better for lower intensity sessions, but do increase your risk for gastrointestinal distress, which is why I do like athletes to, in addition to like having some whole foods for the longer events, still having some sport nutrition products as well, particularly if you're racing something that's shorter than like 8 hours.
Yeah.
Also, make sure that you're looking at the sodium in your gels based on your sweat rate and other sources of sodium. That needs to be taken into account through a holistic perspective. Again, for athletes on the Microcosm team or who are in our Slack channel, check out my example Leadville race nutrition plan that I shared, where I show how you can calculate all of these things out for a 100-mile race.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just look for additional ingredients like pectin, alginate, and caffeine that can have varied effects. Make sure that you're mindful and strategic about your caffeine intake, because that can also really dramatically increase your risk of GI distress.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for athletes for caffeine intake with gels?
I remember Kylie gave me a number not to go over for Leadville, and I've totally forgotten what that number was.
Okay. Yeah, I think
it was maybe 75 an hour. I don't know. I don't want to say it.
100 milligrams an hour?
No. It was lower than that for sure.
Lower than that?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I was hearing something about somebody who is doing 100 milligrams an hour.
It's pretty individually varied
to me.
I will say that I have flown pretty close to the sun on that one, and it literally made me feel like my heart was going to explode.
What did you do at Rio de Lago? You did like four caffeinated
like
gels an hour for 19 hours.
Yeah.
You have a high tolerance.
I can't believe I didn't die.
You're still with us.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle, dude.
Don't do the things that Zoe does.
Yeah. if your eyes are literally bugging out of your head, not good. But again, like those are all things that should be taken into account. And again, there is no one better gel.
Yeah.
Try a bunch of different stuff. Aim for at least 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour. For men, I think a lot of times you may be getting closer to that 70 grams of carbohydrate. So 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate an hour is ideal. We are seeing some people have success above that. But again, that's something that you should be talking, like if you are trying to like mega carb, like doing like 100 or more grams of carbohydrate, that's something that I would really like to see athletes do under the guidance of a professional like Coach Kylie Van Horn at Fly Nutrition.
Yeah. I mean,
love that for you. Love that for your journey.
It's hard.
That's like the double black diamond of fueling. So experts only.
Yes.
And not going to be for everyone.
Well-trained guts.
Yep. So next I wanted to chat through TrainingPeaks. So this is a sort of like an online training platform that everyone on our team uses. And I think it's really transformed our approach to coaching. But I wanted to break down the primary data points that we're looking at when we're building training for athletes and why it's important for athletes to understand them. There are a lot of bits of information on TrainingPeaks. Not all of it, I think, is super useful all the time.
It's a headache, man.
It is. Like, there's a shit ton of numbers. Like, it looks like something from the Matrix. But a lot of that is really helpful, and I wanted to sort of shout out the metrics that we're looking at that are informing how we build training and how we're assessing an athlete's progress, because this has really radically transformed our approach to coaching so that it's a lot more data-driven and a lot more based in evidence, and so that we're able to better track trends over time, which I think is really, really important. Like when I have an athlete that I've been working with for 3 years, I want to be able to go to the data and show them that their efficiency factor is improving, right? Like I think that's really important to be able to show your work and to be able to like show an athlete, like, here's why we're doing this, here's what I'm seeing in the data. With the caveat to that being, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to coach towards independence. And that includes not just independence on the coach, independence on data. Because when you're out there and you're running, you know, the Leadville 100, your EF score doesn't matter at all. It is you in the race, and you have to be able to make autonomous, empowered decisions based on feeling out there. So that's always going to be one of the most important things as well.
Yeah, and I think the data can maybe help athletes over time to develop a better sense of where they're at. But
you don't want to become hyper fixated. I think that's like the biggest rookie. Like I can always tell someone is new to running when they're like obsessed with heart rate, and they're like obsessed with like their stride, or they're obsessed with their cadence. And like when they get like, when they're just like so obsessed with data, I'm like, oh, you're a little baby. Like, oh, you don't know this stuff doesn't matter in the way that you think it does.
Right. And I feel like I almost have trepidation going into TSS, IF, CTL, ATL, TSB, and all these other ridiculous acronyms that TrainingPeaks uses to make themselves feel cutting edge and to make coaches feel like they're doing a good job. I have trepidation because I think there are a lot of data-driven athletes who may take this and go the wrong way with it.
Yeah.
Like what I say to my athletes is, let me be responsible for the data and you focus on how you feel. And when those two things align, great. When there's a mismatch in those things, let's have a conversation to make sure we're focused on the right stuff. And the data is super important, but
how you feel is always more important.
Yeah, of course. But again, like it's easy to go down the trap of trying to make trying to like do the things that's going to make the data look the right way.
Right.
And
then
or
that
like undermines your training.
I'll have an athlete like freak out and text me because they're like, my like EF was super low today, or like my heart rate was really high. Like, what do you think it is? I'm like, I don't know. Probably you drank too much coffee, didn't drink enough water. Like, doesn't matter. Like, it's just one day. So I think it's always important to be looking for the signal in the noise. And if you're spending your entire life like going deep on TrainingPeaks, get a life. So,
okay, training stress score.
TSS. So this is something that athletes are going to see to the far right on their TrainingPeaks score. And what TSS is a composite score that measures the intensity and duration of a workout, giving insight into how much stress the session placed on the body. So it's kind of like a measurement of like, how hard is this?
Well, there's actually 3 components to TSS. There's heart rate TSS, there's power TSS, which is actually the TSS, the default.
Right.
And then there's, see how complicated this gets?
Right.
Now and then there's the running TSS.
Which is what we use for all of our athletes because they are runners and there's not an effective power meter.
Right. So, power is not going to be a great way to measure the stress of a workout, heart rate, too many variables that can impact it.
Yep.
So, how is TSS created via running? It's with paces.
Measured by pace, yeah. So it uses pace and grade adjusted pace. And I think another big caveat here is that all of this data relies on having accurate heart rate and threshold benchmarks. So if you haven't done a field test and you're not working with a coach, all of these numbers just aren't going to make any sense. They're just it's hieroglyphics. They are meaningless for you. Right. They are not telling you anything because the premise that they're based on is flawed. So you do need to do a field test before you take any of this into account. And you do need to and ideally you do that to determine your threshold pace and get heart rate data from that as well. Right. And then you can put that into the back end of TrainingPeaks. You don't really
need so much the heart rate data as much as the understanding of the what your intensity. Number two,
we'll get
segment number two.
Anyway, so all of that is to say, if you haven't done the work, none of this data will be helpful to you. So it's so important to be, again, working with someone to help you understand how to measure your threshold appropriately through a field test, because the way that TrainingPeaks automatically calculates your threshold is it takes the lowest pace that you've run continuously for a full 45 minutes, which is in the last 6 months or 4 months or whatever, which is a very silly way of measuring threshold. That's very different than how
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's kind of a random.
That's why it's always set ridiculously for athletes when they're first starting out.
Yeah,
makes sense.
It's it keeps getting constantly reset. That's a very goofy measurement, and we don't use that. So you do need to do a specific field test. Yeah. But TSS or RTSS can be helpful in tracking to look at weekly to help monitor training load. I think that, again, this is not something I want to at the end of your easy run, getting the magnifying glass out to look at your RTSS, not very helpful, but it can be helpful when you're zooming out to see how you've accumulated training load over multiple weeks. And what you really want to be looking for is aiming for a gradual increase in RTSS to avoid overtraining or injury. And you can help use this number to an extent to help see okay, we might need a recovery day or a down week to help sort of bring the RTSS back into a intentional or functional place.
Okay.
So, second data point that we almost hit on there is intensity factor, or IF. TJ, what is the IF?
This is just essentially your 1 hour effort pace.
Yes, or it's a measurement of a workout intensity relative to your functional threshold pace. So it's it shows you at what percentage on average and you can look at it by mile too.
Right. That's how it's that's how you would use it in practice.
So it's calculated as the ratio of the workout intensity to your threshold pace or power. So I like to use this number to help ensure that athletes are hitting the correct intensity targets during intervals or long runs, or keeping easy days easy.
That's super helpful when you have an athlete who you're aware of what their threshold is, the threshold pace, and then TrainingPeaks compares how their runs are to that number and tells you what percentage of threshold they're going at. So you can very easily hold people accountable to whether they're going too hard on their easy days or not.
Yeah.
Not taking their recovery forever effort days slow enough.
Or not going hard enough on their workouts.
Right, or not hitting the right zones in their workouts and things like that. I mean, this one particular tool, when you have taken an athlete, you have a strong understanding of what their threshold pace is,
right?
Or you've done a field test, and so you can determine it. Then all of a sudden, the accountability factor around the training goes up significantly.
Yeah, and again, this is not something I want athletes thinking about ever while they're on the run. This is something that's a helpful gut check after. Yeah. It's sort of when teachers would give you your quiz back to self-grade. This is sort of my IF was a little bit higher than it needed to be for this easy run. And ideally we want the IF to be between 0.7 and 0.85 on an easy day, which means that it's between 70 and 85% of your threshold, which is ideal for an easy day. If it's lower, I mean, that's fine. And especially with a lot of trail runs, sometimes I'll see it be lower because of, a lot of the terrain, which isn't accounted for in IF. So again, huge caveat for the usefulness of many of these tools. But also like I'll look like when I have athletes doing workouts, if their like warm up is at like 0.9 and then their interval is like at 0.98, that's a big sign that they're taking the easy sections too hard and they're not taking the workout sections hard enough. So it works as accountability in both directions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably the metric that with my stronger athletes that I look at the most.
Yeah, same. I like it. And again, it's more of like just like a gut check, like, hey, let's slow it down a little bit.
Or speed it up.
Right?
Or
like
you
a lot
were
of
right
times.
On track. I didn't think I was doing it right.
Right.
No, you were right where you wanted to be.
Right. Because I don't like to give specific pacing guidance unless I have someone who's running a 5K, running a marathon. I don't assign workouts in a specific pace.
Right.
We run by effort.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, okay, the intention is to go into this workout, engage it with effort, and then to grade yourself after with the IF and sort of build that awareness. But again, using that tool to coach yourself towards greater independence and not dependence on the data, because you cannot get your IF when you are out in the field.
No, but if I could, oh boy.
I would love a gold star. All right, so another one we like to use is chronic training load, or CTL. TJ, what is CTL?
It's your chronic training load, Zoe.
Awesome. Incredible.
No, so this is what you were talking about kind of up front when you're talking about TSS, or really what running athletes are going to use is our TSS.
Yeah.
Which is, again, based on pace, not on heart rate, and not on power, pace. And so this is kind of going to take the number, like the stress that you've accumulated in a run, and it's going to take a rolling average of those stresses over time. Typically, I think it's like 6 weeks or something like that. And it represents that as like a number called chronic training load. That just assesses kind of like where your fitness is at, basically. Like if your training load if that number is getting greater over time, it means fitness is increasing over time. Like you're handling more load over time. And so it's just basically a way to like monitor long-term fitness. And it really helps like the coach determine like what is the productivity of the workouts. Like, are we providing the right stimulus to get the adaptations that we're wanting to help the athlete progress, succeed, grow, and ultimately, accomplish their goals. And then it also, when you use this in conjunction with the other two parts of this, which are ATL and TSB, which are your training load and your training stress balance.
Acute training load rather than chronic.
Right. Acute training load rather than chronic. Right. When you use this in combination with those things, we kind of get a greater assessment of like what the athlete's like readiness is and their like level of fatigue, and which is really important for tapering and making sure athletes are fresh and they're not like chronically stressed and stuff like that. So, over time, you want to kind of see a gradual increase in CTL. That's going to be associated with improved performances. And then why don't you take us through ATL?
Acute training load, different from chronic training load, measures short-term training load, an average over the last 7 days. And this is a good number because it provides insight into how fatigued you are from recent workouts. So not just from the whole training block, from this week. So it's a good number to use in conjunction with the CTL. TSB, or training stress balance, is the difference between CTL and ATL. So a negative TSB, like -10, -60, whatever it is, means that you're likely fatigued, while a positive TSB indicates readiness to perform. So there will be times where you do want a negative TSB because that means you are taking on load. But as we move into a taper, or like as we recover from a training block, we do want to see that training TSB score get lower and get more or go higher.
Right.
More
Not
positive
negative,
TSB.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's hard to explain, but
we want to see more balance in our training stress. So not a negative TSB score. So the way that I like to use it is in planning key races or hard workouts when that TSB is positive. And if I see an athlete's TSB score is bonkers low, I'm not going to give them a huge threshold workout. I'm not going to give them a big old VO2 max workout. It's not going to be as productive. So it's really helpful, I think, to use ATL and TSB to ensure that you're not overloading the body right before an important race or event. Again, huge caveat. I have absolutely rocked races when my TSB has been not optimal.
Yeah.
Like, I think I had, like, I remember showing you my TSB before I ran a sub 5 50K, and I was like, shit, this does not look like I'm ready to perform. And I was. So you never want these to be a prediction of your performance. It is a tool to potentially understand how ready you are to take on load. So especially if you're, again, leaning on the subjective data more than the number data. If you feel fatigued and your TSB is negative, that is a good indication you need more recovery. If you feel great and the TSB is negative, maybe just bring a little more awareness and think about how you're really feeling when you're out there. But do not let the numbers dictate how you feel.
Yeah. And I think, again, like, it's nice for athletes to see that their fitness is increasing over time and that, they are accumulating fatigue as a result of the work they've been doing in the current training week that they're in. I don't like it when athletes freak out over the form TSB thing, because
also, freaking out is just never the solution.
No, but one of the downsides or caveats of this is for certain personality types, there is just a strong want to make the data look the way it's supposed to look, but there is no data that's supposed to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Some athletes are going to be race ready with a lower TSB score than other athletes. You don't optimally want a negative TSB score, because that would indicate that there's still some fatigue there.
Yeah.
And you're not as ready to go as you could be, but you don't need to have a 20 or a 30 or 50, forms TSB score in order to perform well.
Yeah.
You can perform, some people perform well with a lower TSB. So it's about understanding and trying to track the trends over time that indicate where an athlete needs to be to perform their best. And so I always like to get feedback from athletes around when we go into, when we just done a race, and how did you feel? Did you feel very fresh for that race? No, my legs felt heavy. Okay, let me check, TSB. Okay, maybe, we should have backed off training 1 week earlier. Okay, we can make that adjustment. No, or someone's I was firing. I felt so good. Okay, great. That 20 minutes of moderate work on the Tuesday of race week really was effective for you. And your TSB was this.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of track and record those trends over time to then increase the likelihood of getting an athlete in the position to have a great performance.
Yeah.
That's where this really helps. I think, oh man, I wish I could hide all these numbers from the athletes because I don't really feel like they're super helpful for athletes, but they're incredibly helpful for coaches.
Yeah,
what do you think about
I
that?
more share it I want athletes to understand the why behind what we're doing.
Sure.
But I also don't want them to think that data is destiny, and I want them to remember the data isn't their training. And I want them to...
No, that's so cool because, okay, I started working in TrainingPeaks with my coach.
Right.
3 months ago.
Yeah.
And I started at a 0 fitness score.
Yeah.
And I've been training for 7+ years.
Yeah.
And I put all of my training into TrainingPeaks.
Right.
And I wanted my coach to have everything because I'd never personally trained with TrainingPeaks before. And
you're like, this is amazing. Look at all these
look
shiny
at all
numbers.
This cool stuff. And then why the hell is my fitness score a 25? I am.
You put 7 years of data.
I know, and I'm I'm only a 25.
Womp.
And my negative self cycles are going, and I'm shit, man, this guy's gonna know I just suck.
Yeah.
He's not gonna want to
fire me because I'm a 25.
I'm a 25 in here, and I'm
but a 10 in my heart.
Sure, and I'm just ugh, this is the drag of this being on the athlete side.
Yeah.
But the great thing from the coach is like, okay, I was at like whatever, very low there. And now I'm like at almost 100 in a couple months. So like it can change very quickly, but and it isn't the end all be all.
It is not. And I always want athletes to understand, like, again, like I know someone's a beginner when they're obsessed with data.
Yeah.
Like I also know they're a beginner if they're not using any data. All of this has to be understood and used in a holistic way and with a lot of context. But I think what I want, like the thing I would want to impress upon athletes is just because something seems sciencey and really easy to measure doesn't mean it's going to be helpful in informing decision making. Doesn't always mean it's going to be productive in guiding training decisions, and never means that we should hyperfixate on it.
Right.
How you feel is the most important data that you can gather as an athlete. I don't give a fuck what your heart rate monitor says. It matters how you feel.
You can just ditch the heart rate monitors. We've already mentioned that.
I think they're an okay tool to use, but again, I just am mind blown every time I have an athlete that's like, my heart rate was crazy. And I'm like, well, how did you feel? And they're like, I felt fine. I'm like, great.
No, I mean, I got a comment on my workout from this week that like I was out of my quote unquote zones because of like whatever my heart rate was on Strava or something. And it's just like the context of that was like I was at sea level for 12 days. So of course my heart rate is going to be way elevated during my threshold workout. And if I had, you know, adhered to that number, I would have gone even slower and it would have been a zone 2 workout. Instead, I was barely in my threshold. And it's just like, there is so much more nuance, and you can really tell when someone knows what they're talking about and when they don't know what they're talking about, when they like stick to their guns on one specific thing and they're like, that's the thing that I'm gonna die on this hill of this thing. And it's like, okay, training doesn't work that way.
Nope.
Unfortunately,
the human body doesn't work that way.
No. I will say this is all nice.
Yes.
And I love using this app, and there's so much more for me to learn about how to program and stuff. And there's really cool stuff here. It's going to take a long time to learn everything. I think this is probably the basics and where
they have a lot of, if you're a nerd and you want to understand stuff, TrainingPeaks has a lot of great resources on YouTube. Yeah. But again, you definitely don't need to get a PhD in TrainingPeaks data. And it's just go ahead and hire a coach. But again, it's like about finding that balance between having enough data and information that you can check trends long term so that you can like sort of zoom out and see like the Monet image of your training. But if you're trying to look at one single breaststroke every single day, you're actually looking at your training in a less accurate way.
And I would, just to add on to that, I would say the athletes we see over time who are the most successful are the ones who focus more on how did I feel today and are willing to articulate that in their training log and build self-awareness based on that information.
Yep.
All right.
TrainingPeaks. We love it. Here's how to make it useful. And if you are looking to make your training useful, periodized, and driven by the best available data and science, reach out to us. Microcosmcoaching@gmail.com.
Love to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
Take care.